Good morning. Today is September the 11th, 2019. Today I have taken out the astrological chart of Donald Trump and looked at that, studied that. I've been studying it actually for a couple of years in relation to the United States chart. What is it that gave him such energetic assistance to come from being a reality star and a so-called businessman who had been bankrupted 5 times to all of a sudden assume the highest office in the land and perhaps in the world? Well, I looked at his chart, and in his chart he has a 29-degree Leo ascendant. That is probably the most powerful degree in all of astrology. It's ruled by Regulus. It's ruled by the lion heart. It deems and gives great power and capability to rise to great heights in one lifetime. The tragic side of Regulus is that it has an overriding ego. It is the lion roaring in its most expressive way and overbearing and bullying way. So ultimately, Regulus, unless it is honored with a great spiritual path, it comes to great downfall. Usually what they call falling from grace and ending up on the garbage heap, even sometimes ending up in prison, or definitely losing all reputation and all riches. I don't wish that on anybody. I'm just explaining the astrology of that ascendant and how karma has a way of circling back in by our actions if we do not take the benevolent gifts and use them in the highest manner. The other thing that I found quite interesting is that Donald Trump's Saturn is at 23 degrees Cancer. So he has a karmic debt to honor the female form, to honor woman, and to, most of all, honor the United States, being ruled by Cancer, being a Cancer. And so his soul destiny was to learn the compassionate heart. Remember, we talked about that North Node in Cancer right now. Well, that North Node has been meeting up with his Saturn and saying, are you going to do this? Are you going to follow the compassionate heart? Are you going to open your heart to the suffering of others? Though we all know the answer to that one. The other thing is, his Saturn is exactly conjunct the Mercury, the communication aspects of the United States, which rules newspapers, TV, media, communication in all forms. And with his Saturn on Mercury, it's almost like he has this obsessive tendency not only to lie and mislead through communication, but to actually, Saturn being a planet of cold clamping down on whatever sign it rules or is touching in another person's chart. It's actually this natural tendency and almost karmic destiny to clamp down on the freedom of the media. His Saturn lies in the 8th house of the United States, so there's a very plutonic overlay to his Saturn. And the interesting thing is that next January, if you keep remembering, I talk about how we're going to build after October 4th, when Pluto goes direct. We're building towards this Pluto opposition to the United States Mercury in January 10th. And it's also going to oppose Donald Trump's karmic planet, Saturn, because Saturn is sitting on the American Mercury. And so Pluto is going to be opposing his Saturn. So at that time, this is a combustible, powerful karmic time of retribution for him. But it also could be a time when he tries to completely step in and ban the media altogether, or give no press interviews, or create a propaganda of immense proportions. But because Pluto is opposing his Saturn, he has gotten away his whole life with being untruthful and with using his charm and intuitive capabilities in a way, because he has also Mercury in Cancer. And that can be a very manipulative Mercury. It is a Mercury that is sensing what is needed to be said in the moment, and truth just flies right out the window. So his Saturn on the United States Mercury has given him a push to throw truth out the window like never before in his existence. And also with Pluto opposing his Saturn, an increased sense in January of feeling that he's literally not only fighting for his role as president of the United States, but fighting for his life, fighting for his reputation, fighting for his role, his brand. Mercury is your brand. Saturn in Cancer. He hasn't heeded that strong message of developing the compassionate heart. He's gone in the opposite directions. He said opportunity time and time again through the gun violations, through the horrible massacres of people, through the children at the border, and people coming from countries where they needed a mother energy to open arms and shelter them from the storms, to the fact of the Bahamas right now and the hurricanes. And each time he's had these, it's like the universe has come in and said, okay, here's another opportunity to change your tone, to be gentle and kind and loving, and to protect, to become the grand protector. Because the higher aspect of Leo, and remember, he is 29 degrees Leo rising, so he has had this great opportunity to be the divine protector, to come out and be the lion that looks after his pride of being all those beneath his realm, to be the king, the protector king. And of course has been the protector of his own skin. So Pluto opposing his Saturn, the Lord of Karma, on January 10th, going all the way through January, February, March. That's a strong hit that he's getting. And then Pluto's moving up to oppose his Venus. So January onward of next year. And what is Venus? Venus is his love nature. Venus is his marriage. Venus is his capability of how he has spent money, how he's used his money. Venus in Cancer, he's used it to create all these hotels, these places where people can come and receive nurturing. But instead of taking that and using it in a way of business, he's used it in a self-serving way of lining his own pockets. So Pluto's coming up to expose that. So I would expect over the next few months that we're not just going to hear about Scotland or Mar-a-Lago. We're going to hear about all his properties all over the world and his ways of using the money. And Pluto's going to expose the underbelly of what he's done. Now, Pluto in his chart is going through his 5th house of children. So Pluto is affecting him profoundly in the family way. Pluto is coming up to affect also his ego, because that is the house of our ego, and it's ruled by Leo. And with him having a Leo rising, we say, okay, let's look at two things. Let's look where his sun is in his chart, and let's look at the 5th house. So with Pluto going through the 5th house, all his creative ventures, and his children are also the offspring of his creative force, all of that is going to come to the light. And that's going to be powerful also for him. So Pluto is going to wreak a lot of destruction on his life if over the next October, November, December, January, he doesn't make some profound changes. Because if we work along with the energies of Pluto, we can take a horrific situation, be it a disease in our body or a loss of our home or marriage or whatever is going on, and we can go through a powerful personal transformation. It's never too late for anyone. And so here we have the United States having Pluto move and edge ever closer to its Pluto return, Pluto being 27 degrees. So that's another thing. Pluto at 27 degrees for the United States is opposing Donald Trump's Venus and his Saturn, not by degree, but pretty darn close. So, and it's bringing forth an opening of the underbelly of what's driving him, what's motivating him. And also when I think of Saturn and Saturn being in Cancer, I see it to be Saturn being father, Cancer being mother for Donald Trump. I see it as being that Donald Trump, with the Saturn influence on Cancer, could have had a very cold mother, a mother that was not benevolent and warm and tender and loving and nurturing. And out of that, he does not equate intimacy with woman. He equates intimacy more with father, because the Saturn being in Cancer, the nurturing has come and the protection has come more through the father. And if you look back on his life, that's absolutely correct. His father came in and just bailed him out over and over and over. And he had a great connection to his father. His father definitely saved his bacon 5 or 6 times that we know of. But there would also be a Saturnian rule of the father, sending him off to military school and being tough hard as nails and teaching him things that were not of the best nature about compassion and kindness. So that is one thing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that this year, being a full moon baby, he's born with his sun exactly opposite his moon. He's born exactly just maybe hours before the full moon, maybe 2 hours before the full moon. So his sun is in Gemini, excuse me, and his moon is in Sagittarius. So he has, at the time of his birth, what that usually means, Sun being the solar energy of the father, Gemini, teaching him about communication, being out in the world and all of that, and the mother, Sagittarius, being more of a, I would say, rigid beliefs and probably a spiritual nature, but perhaps a defined, rigid spiritual upbringing. But because they're in opposition to each other, it usually denotes a situation where mother and father at the time of birth were in opposition to each other. So he didn't come into a home of closely knit, loving parents in synergy at the time of his birth. There was a lot going on that was oppositional, so they may have had very opposite expressions of life, of being, and of living. And so that would create within him a very difficult, hard time for him to integrate the male and female within his own being. When full moon babies are very intense people, because of that fact that the male-female is at war within at the moment of birth. And so it's very, very difficult to them to be in their male energy and at the same time to be able to draw on the feminine aspect, because we all have both. So he would either be overly emotional, all in the female, with no logic, or all in the male, completely divorced from his heart, and babbling on and on to the extreme levels of Gemini, lacking the wisdom aspect of Gemini. So that's what's going on for him. The final thing I wanted to say about his chart is that he's born with Mars exactly on his ascendant. Now, in spiritual astrology, we are the ascendant. That's what our soul is. So he came in as a Leo. I'll look at me, I'm larger than life. I take up the oxygen in the room. But Leos can also be very generous and kind and loving, which could have come out toward his children in some aspect, some form. But with the Mars and the ascendant, extremely aggressive and overbearing and bullying capacity. And Mars being the ego in the chart, the male sexual energy, could have been very aggressive sexually, pushing his weight around sexually. We know about that. We're not going to go into that in great amount here, but let's just put it this way. His masculinity is something he prides himself on, whether it's a given or not, who's to know? Only the women that have been with him know that one. But the Mars in Leo has created a lot of problems for him because he doesn't listen. There's no listening capacity in this chart. I'm going to go into, in another reading, why I think he is president at this time for our country. And there is a divine spiritual level to this that will be a very different reading, and I think you'll enjoy it. I think I might do it this week. But I do want to end there. And just expect the next 6-8 months to be a rip-snorting time in the United States. And I love you all, and I do pray for him every night as much as I pray for anybody else. We all need it. And his improving, his attitude and his expression in this world is of benefit to all. So we all should be praying for him. At least that's my perspective on it. God bless you all. I love you. And may God have mercy on us all. Thank you. Remember to connect with your own capability for divine mercy.